And our Bible reading this week is going to be in Luke chapter 21. And thinking about the big idea for this chapter, how about if we just pick temple? Because
Yeah,
temple
that's right.
temple is certainly the focus in what may appear to be two segments. We have this little bit about the widow in verses 1 through 4, and
Right.
then this calamity in the rest of the chapter, but actually maybe it's not two separate pieces. Maybe they kind of go together.
No, I think this is the same temple stuff that we first saw back in chapter 19 when Jesus is first entering Jerusalem, weeps over it because she did not know the day of her visitation. And what we've seen in our reading since the end of chapter 19 where that happened is Jesus, in a sense, inspecting the temple. I mean, that's where everything from driving out money changers to his confrontations that we saw in our reading last week in chapter 20. And chapter 20 ends with this warning about being aware of scribes who, among other things, like to devour widows' houses. And there's our connection to where we're picking up this week. The irony of irony is, so when Jesus comes to inspect the temple to see if the true worship of God is there, the only thing that he finds as far as true worship is, ironically, the widow who gave all. All the religious leaders, the elites, the well-educated, the rich, the only true worshiper that he notices on the day of visitation, so to speak, is this widow.
It's part of that in and out story we've been
Very much so.
following
That's right.
all the way through much of Luke's gospel, and that is you would expect all the temple leaders and religious leaders and students of the law to be in,
Right.
and yet they're not. And then here is this random, nameless, poor widow woman, and she is the one
Right.
that is in. The contrast is powerful.
And they want to destroy Jesus. I mean, by this point, they realize he's talking about them, and they want to lay hands on him.
Of course, the thing I think everybody's going to want to know about is this. Let's just describe it as the calamity that
Yes.
is covered by
Right.
the rest of the chapter. And of course, the big question is, what is that? What is
Yeah.
that all about? So can you give like a 15-second summary to cover all the bases on that? Clearly, it is about the temple because
Oh,
pay
absolutely.
attention to verses 6 and 7 because they're talking about the temple and Jesus is saying one stone is not going to be left on another. And they ask, when will these things happen? So to me, that's important because it sets context. We know what he's talking about.
Right. That's right. No, he entered Jerusalem weeping over it because she did not know the day of visitation. And so now, having come and inspected the fruit of Israel and found it lacking, and not just lacking, but he realizes that they are rejecting him. And that will become more emphatic in the next chapter as the plot to crucify Jesus becomes explicit. Jesus foretells the judgment upon those who reject him. It'll be the destruction of Jerusalem and the removal of the temple that was not clean and not fruitful.
And so maybe one of the great sort of takeaways from this picture in chapter 21 is the fact that God does bring judgment.
Yeah.
And that's a picture of God, it's a picture of Jesus that I think in our culture is largely ignored, but it isn't ignored by the gospel writers.
No.
You can reject him for a while,
Right.
but ultimately there is a consequence. And
right.
so ponder that because we're gonna get back to that again, talking about these pictures of
Yeah,
judgment
absolutely.
and in another context. So I think that's an idea for us to ponder as an application is do we
Absolutely.
appreciate the righteousness and the justice of God that's on exhibit here.
Absolutely.
All right, so Luke 21 this week. Hope you enjoy your read and ponder the judgment of God as you're looking through this chapter.